The following is a presentation of the Mat Talk Podcast Network.
It's time to attack. With the Attack Style Wrestling Podcast. Here on the Attack Style Wrestling Podcast, you'll find youth and high school coaching tips for coaches, parents, and wrestlers, featuring Gable-trained NCAA champion and Hall of Fame high school coach Daryl Weber. Also featured is a monthly dialogue with legendary wrestling coach Dan Gable. Find out more on AttackStyleWrestling.com. Now, on to the show. Now, up on the Attack Style Wrestling Podcast, we continue with part 3 of our series on classified coaching secrets. I need some dramatic music there, Daryl. It's just, it's not quite doing it. I'm trying to do like the whole, was it David Letterman or was it the Leno, like, Takai secrets? It just doesn't quite work for me, but classified coaching secrets. And now today's topic, boy, this one can open a can of worms really, really quickly. And it's about parents in the practice room. And this is there's some places that have bleachers where the parents sit, and there's some places where that door is locked. And sometimes you can see lawsuits because that door is locked. And sometimes you can see, all right, coach knows what's best. From my own personal experience, I don't believe the door was locked, but I think it might have been, because if you were late to practice, you weren't getting in. And if you were late to practice, the rest of us had to run. So you better not be late to practice. So sometimes it's better to see that door locked and just say, all right, I'm going to have to make up something to tell coach. The second one was no parents were in the room either. So I grew up, when I came through wrestling, we had, the coach and the assistant coaches, they ran the roost. And that's not always the case. So let's talk a little bit about, Coach Weber, your philosophy on parents in the practice room, some experiences that you've seen on both sides, and how we can really broach this topic, because it's not a super divisive topic, but there are people that are staunch supporters of both.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and I think, there's different scenarios that you have to look at, and I'll give some of my reasoning. And you have to look at it differently with what age group you're with, whether it's a club situation or whether it's like a school in-season situation. But just to give you background, when I was coaching at Christiansburg, the first couple of years, we kind of had an open door policy, and parents could come in there. And it came to a point one year, and we were getting into a season. We had a really good team, and there was like a dozen parents coming in watching practice every day. And this is when Coach Dresser and I were coaching together. And I just remember, number one, thinking there was going to be a lot of competition for this team for certain spots. It was like I said, it was a good team, and typically. When you get into high-level high school coaching, the better team you got, the more issues you got typically. And I'm sure that's with any sport, football, baseball, anything like that. Because you've got kids that are putting in a lot of time. You got parents that are probably really involved. So you've got to manage things correctly. But how I look at it is you always have to make the decision that's best for the kid and the teams. So we were getting into the season, and like I said, we had a bunch of kids coming in, or a bunch of parents coming into practice, and I could just see the pressure mounting on these kids. And just imagine if you've got a really involved parent, and you go to practice, they're at practice, and you go and you have a bad day and so-and-so beats you, or you get taken down in overtime in a match in practice and this and that. There's a huge difference between going to practice, maybe having a bad day, and going home and forgetting about it. And then the other side, going to practice, having a bad day, and then going home, sitting down at the dinner table and getting grilled over it. Why'd you let so-and-so? You need to do this. That's just, there's no escape. There's no escape. There's no relief. So that's how I was looking at the situation, and I could see this mounting on kids. And I remember talking with Coach Dresser. I mean, like, hey, man, and we'd never done it before, and we knew that if we closed practices, it was going to be an issue. There was going to be a storm coming at us. And then finally, an incident happened at practice with one of the parents, which forced our hand and closed the doors the next day. And there was a lot of backlash, but you gotta hold strong. And then the best thing was one of the dads that he just loved to come to practice and watch it. I don't think this parent in particular was really too bad on getting on his kid at home and stuff like that. But he just loved coming to practice and watching the kids scrap. So he was upset. He's like we took his favorite TV show away. And he came up to us. He came up to me like a week later, a couple of days later, and he's like, "Oh man, you guys are catching it, aren't you? You pissed everybody off by not letting them in practice, blah blah blah." And I'm like, "Well, we got to do what you got to do." And he goes, "Let me tell you what I think." And I figured he was going to give me a piece of his mind. And he said, "I was pissed off at first because I like going in there. But when his son came home and the dad started talking about it, the son said, 'Dad, we don't need you in there. We're just fine without you. Just get over it.' Basically." He said, "It dawned on me that maybe the kids didn't want us in there either. And it was the best, I was being a little bit selfish. And maybe it's the best scenario to let the coaches do their job and let the kids kind of have a break from it all when they leave the practice room. Because, like I said, if you're coaching hard, you're getting on those kids and you're pushing them hard in practice. They need it. What if coach just came home with them all night long and tried coaching them up the whole time? Those kids need a break. They need to be able to be kids. So I think you need to look at your situation and typically, especially as they get older, those kids need to be able to the whole objective when you get an athlete out for wrestling or any other sport is you want to develop an internal drive as quickly as possible. If that athlete is doing things for coach or he's training hard for mom or dad, they're only going to get so good. When they go for runs in the morning on their own, lift weights on their own, come to practice and kill themselves because they want to get good and they want to win a state championship because they got an internal drive, well, that's when sky's the limit. So you got to keep it all in perspective, and that's the ultimate goal is to develop that internal drive. So you got to make sure the decisions that you're making and the support that you're giving and things you're talking about are trying to steer them in that direction all the time.
Yeah, I think back to my experiences again because I was involved in various different sports in various capacities when I was in high school, and I think back into it as I'd sit there and I'd walk into girls' basketball practice where I did the stats and PA for them, in the fall season back in Virginia when it was a fall sport. I don't remember ever seeing a parent in a practice room. Same with volleyball. Never saw a parent in the gym during practice there. The only sports where we saw parents actually show up were the outdoor sports. We'd see some people in the lawn chairs outside of football practice or, outside the outfield in the baseball field or along the foul line. So it almost brings up that varsity blues type of thing. It's like the parents are more worried about Gilroy than they are, James Vanderbeek getting into Brown. So those are real life scenarios that I use that as an example because is this something that we see as a commonality as parents in the practice across all sports? I mean, you explained the situation you had there when you were coaching, but as I think about it, it's like, why do I have to take why do you think the parent, let's take the parent's position for a minute. Why do you think they feel they should be in the practice room?
Oh, I mean, there's all different types of reasons, I'm sure. But bottom line is you need that individual, those athletes need to develop that internal drive. They need to develop as themselves. They need to make decisions on their own. They need to learn they're being held back if they have to look over, and if you're out there wrestling and you're worried about getting taken down by so and so because your dad doesn't like that kid's dad or whatever. I mean, there's all kinds of scenarios that can be going on, and it's just the whole situation is so much less pure with those influences in there, rather than it just be going into practice and having the athletes and the coach and no other influencers in there. It's just that is a pure environment that nurtures the most development and the right development, in my opinion.
Yeah, and again, drawing some comparisons between my alma mater where you were coaching, they were both in the same, actually they still are in terms of how Virginia does their things, but without parents in our practice room, that didn't stop the parents from still having those discussions at the pizza joint about what's wrong with the kids. You know, it doesn't stop them whether they're in there or not. So, I mean, right. You know, and I'm also thinking of another movie reference that draws on this is in Hoosiers when they hired Gene Hackman, you know, Norman Dale to come in. And then there was the dad who was like kind of acting as the assistant coach, and he showed him the door. And practices were closed, and it was like rabble, 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 rabble. Yeah, that all got quiet when they won a state title.
Yeah. I mean, and that's a great point, Jason. Is you want that excitement, you want that environment where people are excited and they're talking about it, even if they're gossiping and all that stuff. But like I said, you that's your room as a coach. That's your element. You set the rules. You got to do what you think is absolute best for those kids and their development, and even, no matter how hard the decisions are, and you got to handle it in the right way too. If you're in a situation where they're used to coming into practice, or they something like that, you can't just wait for them to walk up the door and slam it in their face. You've got to explain to them the logic behind it, why you want to do it, why you think it's the best for those athletes, and hopefully they believe you and buy in. And if they don't, well, they're gonna have to figure it out. But yeah, you want to keep them involved, man. You want that excitement around your program. That's just, you want to make sure you're getting the proper development and the best things going on in practice as possible as well.
Here's something that popped into my head as we were talking about this, and it's about if some of these parents, if you've got the time to spend that, at 2 hours, hour and a half, 2 hours, 2.5, in some cases 3 hours at a wrestling practice, don't you think that your time could be better spent for the program doing something else? If there's a booster club, there's time that could be spent, doing things for the team in that respect. I mean, what are some strategies you think that for parents that want to be involved, but you don't want them in the practice room? What are some things that you feel that you've seen success on, and your experience is like, yeah, this is what you should be doing to help us out and helping your son or daughter out?
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, you're exactly right. That could be 5 podcasts by itself.
Let's write that down. We're going to have 5-part series on what parents can do. No, okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of community involvement and fundraising things that can be going on. So yeah, that might be a good strategy. Is if you got really some, and that is a great strategy. Is to give people things that they can do to be involved. Those people that really want to be involved in your program. Don't say, no, we don't need your help. Get out of here. Find things, we used to have, we used to like to supply food at tournaments for the wrestlers. So we would have good food for them to eat at tournaments and whatnot. And, I didn't like going to the grocery store. So one of the moms or one of the parents would typically, go to get groceries for it, stuff like that, even, not even fundraising things, just things that could help you administratively. They can taking T-shirt orders and organizing all that stuff. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of things you can delegate. And if people are really genuinely wanting to be part of the program and they're that excited about it, they're going to jump at a chance to help you out, because they know that coaches have a lot on their plate, and anything that can be delegated is a huge help.
Now, then there's the other type of wrestling parent. And again, we're not trying to criticize anyone here, but these type of parents exist. And you're in a unique situation. Being an NCAA champion, you probably have run into this less frequently than, say, the coach, the coach, the assistant football coach who's the head wrestling coach, who wrestled some, had some decent success in high school. And it's the parent who was a really good wrestler, and now their son or daughter is a really good wrestler. And in a lot of cases, the dad is going to think, or in some cases, the women. I mean, Christy Davis, you don't want to, women's freestyle, she knows a thing or two about wrestling, so I don't want to just make this gender specific, but the parent comes in with a knowledge of wrestling that is absolutely very good, but they're not the coach of the team. How do you deal with that parent that knows what they're talking about most of the time, but they're looking at it through the lens of their child versus the team?
Well, first off, let's just make it clear that NCAA titles do not void you of those issues. I had plenty of people question my methods because and they're just passionate. Wrestling is a very personal sport, and it brings out a lot of passion, and that's just something you got to understand and go in with open eyes if you're going to be a wrestling coach. But yeah, I mean, that is definitely, I mean, if you have an asset in your program, that's something you really have to look at case by case and look at that person's personality and where their true, where their heart really is. I mean, are they just trying to get in the room so they can stand over their son or their daughter and ignore everybody else, and create drama? That type of person, you've got to, you can't let in. So you've got to know, you got to be able to read people, and maybe your best policy is just no parents, and you might have an NCAA champ who's a dad, and you just got to say, listen, man, I know you'd be a huge asset, but if I break the rule for you, then it's going to open up a can of worms. But those are just, there's plenty of parents that help coach. I think, if you're going to go down that road, I think you just got to be really upfront and say, you got to be here for the other kids. Maybe, can't even like coach your kid in practice. It's something like that. I mean, I never had to extensively deal with that. I kind of steered away from it, but I know people that do and get parents involved, and especially at the youth level. At the youth level, a lot of times you have to use parents, but you still got to have that same talk. You got to make sure they're in it. If they're going to put their shoes on and get on the mat, they got to be there for all the kids. They can't just be, you can't just have parents get on the mat and just standing over their own kids. Number one, it's not fair. Number two, it's not the best thing a lot of times for their kid. So you got to be able to evaluate the situation, and you got to be able to make some. When it comes to this type of stuff, you got to look honestly and figure out what's best for the kid and make the decision based off of that, the kid and the team and the program. And no other, can't be influenced by anything else. Can't be afraid of confrontation. You got to honestly look, weigh all the options, and make your decision off of your philosophies. It's your program, and deal with things from there. But try to handle things in the best way possible.
Yeah, and also to go back to your NCAA championship point, just because they're an NCAA champion too doesn't mean they exactly know what they're talking about from a coaching standpoint either. Because again, this is a little bit of a tangent, but it's part of that thing. So, well, you've got to hire an NCAA champion to be your college head wrestling coach. We see that all the time with people arguing. Well, so and so would be a good coach. They were a 3-time national champ. Well, not necessarily. So we got to make sure that we balance that out. But when we talk about we've talked about the parents in practice. What are some things that you found over the years that you thought you had to implement this rule, and all of a sudden something really good ended up blossoming out of it? It's like, you know what? That person was kind of a distraction in the room. Now, all of a sudden, they're like a model parent now that they've found other activities to do. This kind of goes to our previous point about things for them to do. But, situations where, hey, you've got better time to spend and, maybe giving the parents the old, good job for, okay, you guys aren't in the room, but you're doing something for us in our program and your son or daughter.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of situations that happen with. And I think that's something as a coach that you really need to do, and this is something that I struggled with. Sometimes coaches are perfectionists, and they don't want to hand anything off, and you're really going to hold yourself back if you can't do that. You need to look at the beginning of the season and look at things that you can hand off to either assistant coaches or administrators or parents. And number one, it helps you manage your time better. helps you be more effective in the practice room. And number two, it keeps people involved. If they're investing, they know and a lot of people just like helping. So, I mean, if you can give them tasks to do, you can get managers out of the school to help with the team. It just builds like that team, that family atmosphere. So I think that is a great idea. And you have to just, it probably, if you've never done it before, or if you're not doing a good job at it, it probably take you one time to sit down and kind of map out all of these types of tasks that could be delegated. And then, document. I was huge. I have a folder for every single year that I coached full of documentation, because I always want to be able to go back. Because you might be, during the season, you might think, well, okay, we're doing things this way. Everything is going good. Yeah, we need to do it like that next year. I'll remember that. Well, you won't remember the little things. So it's always important, just like Coach Gable talked about, at the end of the year, reflect, document, streamline things, make things better, and, create a document that you can go back to a month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months later and say, oh, yeah, this is how we were doing things last year, and it was really smooth. And pull that out, and there's your delegation categories and how things were done and whatnot. So, yeah, I think putting some thought into what you can delegate and all those different tasks and how to do them. And a lot of times, man, you'll get parents that are way smarter than you, and things that used to take you hours to do, they know how to put on a computer and knock it out in 5 minutes and even make a better process and take it to another level.
And as this circles in and wraps into what we're doing with the attack style wrestling and the Gable trained, what are some things that parents can expect to get from Gable trained by attack style wrestling?
Oh, I mean, parents and coaches both, you try to give them advice. Obviously, a lot of parents don't do things. There's a lot of times parents make decisions that maybe, steer their kid in the wrong direction, or, don't work out the best. And it's never maliciously. It's because they haven't been coached up. They haven't been taught how to properly handle situations and do things. And, the one thing when I was a coach that hurt more than anything was losing a wrestler. If I had a wrestler that was a wrestler that was, into it, and he quit, or they quit, that hurt more than any loss or anything like that, because I just knew what they were giving up on. I knew they would regret it. And so, a lot of times, there's a lot of factors that come into play there, but sometimes maybe it's how their parents handled it. But it was never on purpose. Parents just need guidance a lot of times on how to handle their kids and how to, instill toughness in them and do all these things and get the right things out of them. So, I try to provide advice for parents on that. Not even talking about getting on the mat with the wrestler and teaching technique and stuff like that. Obviously, we have technical instruction, and we lay all that out so that it's in a progressive fashion. So we say, oh, hey, listen, okay, teach this first, and then once they got this down, teach this, and then this, and how to build on it. And that's how coaches. And I really believe, and I understand how how busy coaches get, and I really try to provide tools in our members area and on attack style wrestling that make it easier for coach to go to practice and go in with a good developmental game plan. Because a lot of people know what they should be doing. They know the best techniques. They know the philosophies. It's just a matter of finding the time to actually document it and put it in order so that it flows together good and you use your time best. There's complete practice plans, or you're a head coach that really knows his stuff, but your middle school coach is maybe never wrestled before. Your youth coach, we have resources in there where you can give them practices. Hey, you've never even wrestled before? Well, here's our philosophies. They print these out. Talk about this to the kids. Here's the practice structure. Watch this video. This is how you teach this half Nelson and this breakdown, and watch this video. And you can delegate different practices and different videos and different philosophies and train your and train your coaches to all get on the same page. So yeah, you're right, man. We try to, that's a big part of what I do at Attack Style Wrestling, and why I started this is to streamline the process and help everybody be as efficient as possible and as effective as possible.
This show is part of the Matt Talk Podcast Network. For more wrestling podcasts, head over to MattTalkOnline.com.